listening to In-Fisherman Storyline, North America's top voice in multi-species freshwater angling. Here is your host, Thomas Allen.
Yeah, Mr. Gary Roach is our guest today on this very special edition of In-Fisherman Storyline. We're gonna we don't have a time limit, Gary, so don't feel like you can't tell me stories. But if we're into 3 hours, we may do a part 2 in a week or something like that. But
you got to come out to the house and then go for another 3-4 hours. Yeah,
let's do it. I have a portable kit. We could do that.
You got to do it. Yeah,
we might have to. Well, Gary has been a long time In-Fisherman contributor. And I really want to hear your story in your words, and I want to go way back. So let's start. Are you born and raised this part of Minnesota?
Yeah, I'm on the 80 acres next to where I was born, in the 40 acres.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And to get lucky enough, my wife found an ad in the paper about land for sale, and oh my God, it was right next to where I was born and raised. And we paid a whopping $2,300 for 80 acres.
Can you believe it? Boy, things have changed. How much? $2,800?
$2,300.
You can't even buy an acre for that nowadays.
Oh, no.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. 2 acres and 2.5 acres up and on Highway 11 just from went for $62,000.
Wow, that's something else.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, but you're in the heart of amazing fishing. I've actually spent some time, quite a bit of time fishing out your way, but obviously the Mission Lake area, the Horseshoe Lake area, you're not too far from Cross Lake. Talk a little bit about how that fishery impacted you.
Well, I was born right on the shores of Mission Lake. They found me floating under the dock, I think it was, where I was at. And anyway, and then my dad had bought a log cabin, 40 acres for $500. I remember that. And my mom raised 8 kids, And then those were tough days, We had in fact, I come out there, I'll show you the cabin that we lived in.
Oh, you still have it?
It was just a one room cabin and a fireplace and, and a barrel stove. And my dad worked at the mines in Crosby Mines as a mechanic, for a diesel mechanic for 30-some years, and retired. Of course, I was born there and went to school there, and then I joined the Navy, and I spent 4 years in the Navy. Kind of floated around the Pacific out there all the way to Hong Kong and on an aircraft carrier.
Really?
And came home, yeah.
Do you remember which boat? Which one was it?
The CVA-31, the Bonhomme Richard. It was it's all tore apart and gone now.
Okay.
And those big old carriers. But that was one of the first angle decks. And the old ones were just you fly straight ahead and put the planes this way. Well, this one here, you fly and hit the deck, and then you wouldn't have to worry about crashing up into the other airplanes. Mm-hmm. And that was the first angle deck. So, and I run a squadron, a CVA-31, a CVA, Carrier Group 19, and we had like little FJ Phantoms, and they were an attack squadron. And I took care of seat ejection, and I took care of liquid oxygen. So for the pilots.
So your task there was to make sure that those elements of the plane functioned and were reliable.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. If they didn't work, the pilots wouldn't come back.
Well, sure. Yeah, you definitely want to be.
And when they pulled that thing to get out, which they had a couple of times, they had to do it, and then the liquid oxygen turned into air oxygen. So, but whenever I needed liberty, the pilots would always say, "Yeah, Roach, he said, we don't want you to poison us with the gas." He says,
So did you find that adaptation to being at sea a pretty easy transition for you, being a guy basically born on the water?
Well,
or did you get seasick? I get seasick.
Oh no! We had 60-footers. Some would come right over the flight deck. So some guys really got sick, but. We were right under the flight deck when the planes landed, because kaboom, they would hit,
Oh, I'm sure.
Felt like they were coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And then I spent a cruise out there, and then come back to Moffett Field and by Frisco, finish up my tour. I came back home and I met my wife Beverly, and we've been married going on 66 years.
Good for you. Good for her.
Good for her, yeah. Oh, yeah,
right.
Good for me, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she takes care of everything, that gal does, yeah.
I'm married up too. I get well taken care of, but I don't know where I wouldn't have made it here on time.
No. Oh, that's what Beverly was. I was taking little naps. She
Yeah.
said, "Hey, time to go."
Get up.
Yeah. So
So while you were overseas, did you? I know that I was in the military too. I was in the Army for not quite 6 years, but it really made me want to be home. It really made me think of home often. It's kind of like I've always been a homebody. You do what you have to do. I signed up for whatever, and it made me value being at home and staying at home. Did you like start making plans for your future at that point?
We were in California, and that's a state where there's hardly any water except for the ocean. Heck, couldn't go catch a sunfish or whatever. Now there's probably a few places you can do, but I was always wanting to be back, Minnesota. And a friend of mine who we had a band, we had our own band for quite a few years. When I came back, and I played instruments, and I met Beverly then through his wife, and then we got married in 59. So like I say, it's been going on 66 years now. So, and we've got the kids. We got 10 grandkids, 10 great grandkids, and 3 kids, and they all hunt and fish. Every one of them hunt and fish. So
they're living the right
all
way.
the kids, all the grandkids, even they got. I can't wait for Grandpa to get them out in the boat. Yeah.
Did you? What did you play for an instrument?
Well, I can play. We had a piano at home. I learned how to play the piano just by ear. I don't know a note of music, but if I hear a song, I can play it.
Okay.
And then I played a mandolin and I played guitar.
Wow.
And I tried to learn how to play the fiddle, but I could just maybe get a one or tune, but that's hard to play. But tune like the mandolin, yeah. We had a band called the Kingsmen, and we played all over this whole area. And we had a guitar picker with Johnny, and then we had Jim Foltz was a singer, and he was a very good singer. We could have went to Nashville. We were that good. So we did that for a while.
Well, that's a good way to augment your outdoor passion, I think.
Oh, yeah. And, Johnny, I grew up with him. He was my next door neighbor. John was. He fished, and his dad, and I worked for his dad in the logging camp. So I logged, and we drove truck, and we did logs and pulpwood and all that good hard work and stuff. That was before they had all this equipment.
Right.
It's all by hand.
Yeah, we're using chainsaws, I assume, at that point, or was
the first chainsaw I ever seen was called a Lombard, and it was a heavy old thing, and it was unbelievable. You could cut that tree down, man. Otherwise, it was Swede saws,
Mm-hmm. Swede saw.
Crosscut saws. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Boy, that lifestyle has been intriguing to me, but talk about men having to be tough.
Oh, yeah, and nobody had anything in those days, That it was in the in the 40s and in the 30s. I was born in 37, so and I was like, and I joined the Navy, at my last year of school. And I joined the Navy, and because we had a winter, it was 1956. I'll remember this. And the snow was this freaking deep. I mean, it was 4 foot. And when you fell a tree, you couldn't find it. So then when it got to be 20 below, then my boss, John Sr., he said, a little bit too cold to work. So I went down to the recruiter, and then it was so funny, I'll never forget this. I said, I want to join. My brothers were in the Navy. My brother Jim and Bob both were in the Navy. Jim was on a destroyer, and Bob, he was a cook and it was like after the Korea. But anyway, he said, you want to go to boot camp in San Diego or you want to go to boot camp in Duluth? I said, well, I want to get the hell out of this country. So I said, San Diego, palm trees. Yeah.
That didn't sound so bad.
No.
But it was still boot camp, wasn't it?
It was the boot camp, and it was easy. Everybody, these big old kids, they never worked a day in their life. And I thought I was on vacation for boot camp. It was so nice.
So that was San Diego.
San Diego was not real big then. You could hit, hitch around the whole thing. And I always went north. A friend of mine that was in camp, we went to North Island is where we were. But after boot camp, we went right to North Island. And then they put us up in Frisco there at Moffett Field. So it was easy. Yeah, it was easy and it was fun. And a friend of mine, Tommy, he married one of the gals from Yucaipa, California. Her folks just came from the concentration camps, and and so they moved here at Yucaipa, and they're all gone now. So, but Tommy, I don't know. I haven't heard from him for a while either. So he might be gone too. So. I never thought I'd ever live this long. Can you imagine?
No, I'm hoping to get through tonight, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
one day at a time.
Imagine it. I'll be 88. You know,
88.
can you believe that?
Well, when we spoke at the Minnesota Hall of Fame banquet this year, you told me, you said, you better hurry up.
Yeah, yeah.
And that rang true with me. I wanted to make sure, but then we had, like I said, to tell this story, we've had Al Linder in. Doug has sat there and told some stories, and Tom Newstrom's been here. I had Mark Fisher in.
Oh yeah. Remember Tommy later? Yeah, Tommy was gone later. Yeah, we got him, put him in on our team. You know, I had 15 guys on my team. That I mean, afterwards, that like that little team there we showed you. Mm-hmm. Well, when I left Lindy's, I went and did a deal just like that, only for 15 guys. So everybody had lawn boats, and every place we went, if somebody needed to do a show or do an in-store promotion, whatever state we were from, they would do it for me. And the manufacturer would love it. So, and it's just like doing it for Al. Al would say, "Hey, how much you go down here? I want you over here at East Coast. I want you here." So I'd get in my old truck and away we go.
So talk a little bit about where your fishing passion really kind of exploded. I imagine growing up where you grew up, it was easy to spend time on the water, but talk about where that passion just really took hold.
Well, you mean when I went to work with Al, you mean? Or
well,
before?
I mean, before, at some point when you discovered you just loved catching fish.
I was taking guys fishing. I was 12, 13 years old. And a lot of the guys that was from Breezy Point, some of the musicians and stuff, they found out, the bait shop found out I could catch crappies, And Mission Lake was just solid crappies, and bass. And they were easy, To me, the bass are still the dumbest fish on the lake, to catch,
They get the best of me once in a while out there, I promise you.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll have to have some secrets.
I'm in.
So that's how I really started then, and then of course, I went to the service, came back, and of course, my dad had an old aluminum boat with a 9-horse motor on it. I would started doing some guide and stuff like that. Well, I worked at a mobile station. I told Tony the story. I worked for Bill Getty at a mobile station where my wife's family lived in a restaurant upstairs called the Corner Cafe. Mm-hmm. See? So then I went from there. I had a car accident. It hurt my back really bad. And so I got out of that deal. And then I went to a Deep Rock station. That was for rent, It was like a 2-pump deal. I pumped gas, and then I had Montgomery Ward sitting there on Main Street, and I would take a lot of their tires. They sold tires, man, and so I would actually put the tires on cars for them. Then I got to a Texaco station, see, and I got to the Texaco station, which is on the Main Street. They come over and say, "Hey, you want to go to a bigger station?" Which I did. So I run that for quite a while, and I bartended the Rustic Bar. I bartended at a wagon wheel out there for my brother-in-law who owned that. I did everything, And because wages weren't thick, I in fact worked for a place called Lark. I did fiberglass in with a friend of mine. Fiberglass, some stuff. Actually, the first live well ever put in a boat, I put.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
And that was in the 315 Lund, that little brown boat. It's in the Hall of Fame right down there in Minneapolis.
No kidding.
Little Falls. Yeah, I could show you that.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, you got to see that. And I had one of the first pedestal seats, and it was an 18-horse Maroon Johnson. That's what I won the tournament with on Minnetonka.
Okay.
In that same little boat.
I suppose it was pretty fast in those days. That was a
18-horse. Yeah, we put a wake behind it, And I got a bass. The bass people that were like from the South Florida Bass Casters Association, BCA they had the first tournament in the Minnetonka, and I won the tournament in that boat.
Had you fished Minnetonka before that? Were you familiar with it? Never saw it?
Never saw it. No, ever. Never.
Yeah.
They had a couple days. Mm-hmm. And Bud Olson was the Sun-Times writer then, Bud Olson. And I've taken him fishing, different lakes and stuff like that. And he was my hero. He did stuff. He was. And when I won the tournament, he was just. We went right to WCCO, man. He had told the whole story. But it was really cool.
How much money did you win in those days? Do you remember?
I just seen that. Beverly just brought that up. I won $1,000 and a boat.
And a boat.
Yeah, and a boat. Yeah, a runabout boat.
Gee whiz.
Yeah, so that was big time. Marv kept put the entry fee in, whatever that was, and he said, "Yeah, you got to go fishing." Well, the tournament was, if you caught a smallmouth, it was worth more points than a largemouth. In other words, if I caught an 18-inch smallmouth, 3-pound smallmouth, you'd have to catch a 5-pound largemouth to beat that.
Oh, no kidding.
Because the smallmouths were so rare in the Minnetonka. Well, I stopped at Dan Gapin's on the way down, and I heard he'd fished it. And he told me some areas where he caught some smallmouth. Well, I tried those areas, got a few largemouth to fish the bank. But when I was with Al over in Wisconsin one time, we were fishing Lake Geneva. I'll never forget that lake because the Playboy Club was on that lake.
Of course it is.
Yeah, we had to go visit one day up there. So I remembered fishing that because there was, where the sailboats are, the floats, they're big anchors. And the bottom of that float is a big wagon wheel of cement or whatever with spokes in it.
To hold the buoy in place.
To hold the boat in place, so when the guy come up from shore, he'd tie his little boat up and they'd go sailing and come back and take. And the bottom of them was smallmouth spawning.
I believe it.
Yeah, unbelievable. So, man, I was like, the first day I was sitting in first place, And the next day I roared out there with my little boat, went back out. And those days you didn't have to keep the fish alive either. You could put them in a cooler. Actually, you put them in a cooler with water in it. So the next day I roared back out there and I won the tournament. Ellender was second place with a nice big string of largemouth, and Rod Romine was third place, who was a guide for Marv Kep. So we took all three places.
That's quite the top three. Did
Yeah.
you know Al at that point?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So obviously
I met Al, and I just heard it. I mean, I just met his wife just a little while ago. I never, he got married. He said nobody knew that. He said, and I met him, and we were going to the luncheon. We were going to go fishing, and I met him and Ron at the shore of North Long Lake, and then Ron would always put a fish or something in Al's windshield wiper or something to let him know he's got his limit.
Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah,
that kind of sounds like a grumpy old man trick.
Yeah,
I remember seeing that.
That's Ron. Well, Ron always fished with me. He always loved to fishing with me. We would go to Canada. Ron would get in my boat, and he's always fiddling around with different stuff to use. I said, Ron, we're catching him on this now. He said, but we might catch him better with this.
Yeah.
I never forgot that. That was a good.
He was an innovator, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
He's a brilliant mind.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this team you built and kind of the commission that you were given from the In-Fisherman crew, and kind of talk about the early days of that relationship.
When I went on the road for him, went on the road, he sent me different states, you might say, all over the country, and we. Well, the dingo jig was the only jig Lindy had was a plastic worm, a dingo jig, and the rig. That was the only three things they had to start with, And then we come up with the walleye with the spinner, and then we took a Canadian jig and put a hook on it, and put a spinner blade on it, and I still have a bunch of them at home. So, of the original spin rig that Ron and I put together, and it was a spinner you could cast out, and it would helicopter down and pull it. It was good for everything. Even the little size. I got some out in the ground. When you come out to my house, I'll give you a handful of the older ones.
I would love to see them.
Yeah. So that's how we started with in the rig, the live bait rig. And, of course, in the old days, we used the barrel sinker before the Lindy. It was a barrel sinker we'd cast out from shore sometimes, And to me, the barrel sinker still is one of the best ones for fishing rocks. Mm-hmm. And I use the barrel, and it doesn't spin like the Lindy rig or the Roach rig sinker spins. It's like a blade. So I'm having a problem with that. I always put the barrel on there if I'm fishing rocks along mille lacs in there, you'll snag up a lot less with a barrel than you will with a pointed sinker. Just common sense.
Yeah.
So but he did that, and I still have some of the old original Lindy rigs. You've probably seen them in a package.
I've seen some of the older ones. Yeah.
Yeah, the older ones. Yeah, I still have a few of them sitting on the shelf somewhere out there.
History.
So that's how it started, and then the idea was the locator. That made us heroes. The locator, man.
And that was the original, the green box?
The green box was actually the 100-footer. And it's still in my boat down there, my original one. And then they come out later with a one would shorten up the distance. It would be a 60-footer, see? And then Marv kept sold a trailer load. A semi-trailer load of these when they first came in. And I took Carl Lawrence, I took him fishing. We got a limit of walleyes on that little lake. Within 45 minutes we had 18 walleyes and all beauties. They got pictures of. They still use that picture in their brochures, some of it. Mm-hmm. And then his had a son too. Well, but anyway.
Were you known then as kind of being the walleye guy? When did that start for you?
Well, I don't know. I fished everything.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever they wanted, I fished. But the walleyes were a harder fish to figure out. The bass are easy fish to figure out, crappies and bluegills and stuff like that, And of course, smallmouth, we never had smallmouth until mille lacs. They put them in mille lacs, But no, the walleyes were a fish that we fished in the wintertime and on Pelican Lake by Bearfield. Mm-hmm. And they were just a majestic fish. They were harder to catch. So we tuned in on those.
But they were like the in-demand fish of the area, right? Like people
the walleye was the one of Minnesota State fish,
right.
So they were, so I fished them so much, and then I fished tournaments, 3 circuits. I fished the MWC, PWT, and the Cabela's. Mm-hmm. All 3 circuits. And I got Angler of the Year in all 3 of them, which is really hard to do.
It sure is.
Especially in each circuit, I got Angler of the Year, and I won some tournaments and lucked out on winning some tournaments, and then that's how it got started. And I don't know, maybe Ron Shera, maybe he started calling me Mr. Walleye, I think, something like that. I used to take him fishing because he couldn't catch a damn fish anyway. So I had to show him how to catch fish.
I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet, so that's fair game.
Good.
The Mr. Walleye moniker was kind of born in those days from you taking on a difficult fish to figure out.
Yeah, and I had a lake that was full of walleyes, which made it easy, The lake was Horseshoe Lake, and there was no landing on it. So the guides didn't know where I was catching all these fish. And Marv Kip would take pictures and pictures and pictures of all these customers I took out. So
yeah,
it kind of grew on you,
Well, it certainly does. Those are like I said, that area is pretty special for catching everything. I mean, you have opportunities at great bass. Horseshoe is a great bass lake.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And nobody knows that.
Yeah.
They hit it pretty hard, but yeah. And Pelican.
Mm-hmm. And those places.
I grew up on Pelican.
Well, you could catch a bass and a walleye in the same cast in a lot of places, and that's what's interesting.
Yeah, nobody knows that. There was never hardly a house. There was never a landing on it then. The channel was in between, and the guy I worked for had the only boat that I used to fish, and I'd fish it in the wintertime, the north end of the lake, on the big lake, the long lake, the hole, always, and then go through the channel, and then it would catch crappies out there in the wintertime, 50 foot of water. Mm-hmm. And then I took Carl Lawrence over on the west lake, where that long weed line comes out.
Yep.
And they were just, and they were just scattered all over the place,
It's still it's interesting comparing those days to these days. I know there's a lot more cabin square footage that's used up. There's a boat ramp. There's a lot more people that fish there, but it's not just that lake or really any lake in particular. This part of the state, and things have changed, but it still fishes very well.
Yeah.
If you want to catch bass, you can have a great time in this part of the state. If you want to catch walleyes, there are numbers of lakes where you can catch good
and the
walleyes.
crappies used to be really big. It used to be.
Well, and there's still some pretty big ones. I had a
Yeah.
buddy take me to a lake up not too far from Leech Lake, south of Leech a little ways, and we caught 13 and 14s all day, Gary.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I wonder though if a lot of that kind of ebbs and flows. Do you feel like what was it the kind of scenario back in your day when a lake's popularity would all of a sudden explode one year and the lake would slow down and then they'd not come back the next year, the anglers? Did it kind of
Fishing pressure.
the fishing pressure? How was it in those days?
It was hardly any of them in those days. You know,
Mhm.
hardly anything. You know, and hardly anybody fished horseshoe. Nobody. Then when they started getting the landing in there, then of course, then that's what guides would have told hit it pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then like our old days, we'd keep too many fish. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So and Pelican, like it was a harder lake to fish, and Al didn't even like that lake, you know, because it was a tough lake, and I grew up on that lake.
Mm-hmm.
Morningside Beach, Old Flat-Screwed. I used to roll the boat along the drop off, and I didn't have a locator. I would look over here; there would be light sand on this side, dark on this side.
Yep, you're right. You could visually see it.
Yeah,
Still could today.
you could just go roll the boat. They had to hang out, a rod hanging out. I had a fly rod, an old steel fly rod. And then the manual rod would bend, and you'd catch a 3-pound walleye, you know. And you'd roll all the way up to the rock pile, and we fished it in the wintertime. We would fish in the first bar, second bar, third bar. And never even got anywhere but there. So
How did you keep tabs on spots in those days? Like you didn't have a GPS.
yeah, just remembering and how the bottom laid.
Yeah.
You know, never had a GPS. No, when we got the locator, that was like, oh man, it's unbelievable. You know, we could find that 50 foot of water in that lake was only 30 foot deep. You know.
So would you, if you're going to go out into the middle of Pelican, I mean, and if you ever look at a map, there's a lot of humps, there's a lot of bars, there's rock piles, there's deep ledges, there's depressions, there's channels, there's everything. It's like it has everything. How accurate do you think you could be in just getting out? Like, I want to go fish this spot today. Could you get yourself out there on the ice and kind of get pretty close?
Cut holes. Yeah.
Cut holes and then
Yeah, you could line up stuff. Yeah.
line stuff up.
Line the birdhouse in the window.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You
or
know,
the trees or something. Oh, yeah, on Mission Lake, where I was born, yeah. The old birdhouse in the window or a couple trees. A Mille Lacs is the same way. You didn't have a cloudy day, rainy day because you couldn't see the shoreline.
Yeah.
But like in Mille Lacs, you would go out and hit that bar, and then you run the bar with your locator.
Mhm.
You run it all the way to the end where she would break the brake. Then you knew where he was at then because you knew the bottom. Yeah, you knew it so well.
You see, I do have this. I can offer. When I first started fishing seriously, I didn't have any type of GPS, and so I was, lining up the willow tree and the red and white striped boat lift, and then this over here, and it was fairly accurate. But
oh, you bet.
But you know what? We didn't know any better, Gary. Like you were just
That's all we knew.
it's what you had to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that the advent of mapping, like Lake Master or Navionics or any of those mapping softwares, were just actual game
Just the
changers.
locators in those days, the old Lowrance, all the little ones and stuff we had in those days, we knew the bottom. We knew the bottom. We knew, the whole lake. We fished the whole lake, 25 miles of lake. And if I started on the east side, I knew that reef, how far it would go and how would it end, And I'd always look. Then I go to the next reef, and I knew how it laid, and kept it here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And nowadays, people don't. Now they just,
It's easy.
Yeah, well, you put a camera down. Oh, there's 4 of them over there.
Yeah, if we could only figure out a way to make them jump in the boat, right?
Yeah.
That'd be the
You
information.
open their mouth, you sucker. Yeah.
I think that in whether it's your early days or currently, I still feel like the key to being successful is spending time on the water. And you must have spent a great deal of time on the water.
All the time, yeah. Every day, you might say, on try to learn more different lakes. And then of course they didn't have a GPS. Then they had what do you call it? It's actually a radio signal. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
They had a different thing. Then Lowrance came out with the cat's meow, you might say then. But yeah, and then of course in the paper graphs, I still got paper for you. Need some paper? I got paper for you. Paper graph, that was awesome.
That
Remember?
was something else.
Yeah, yeah, we used that. Well, I fished I fished the reservoir out in there. In fact, we're going through pictures. I'll have to show you some of that. The guys that we caught fish out in Nebraska, Lake McConaughey.
Mm-hmm.
Big fish, great big walleyes out there in that lake. And Bobby Props. That's when old Bobby Props was still alive and kicking. First ride I took out there, he's in a pontoon boat. We were fishing for trout, rainbows, big rainbows. And then that's how I met Bobby. And I fished all the lakes in Nebraska. Yeah, all the reservoirs in Nebraska, too. I fished all of them in Iowa. I fished them in Pennsylvania reservoirs, Now, how many lakes did I fish? How many walleye lakes did I fish? Oh, man.
That's interesting to me. A little sideline. Harlan Reservoir in Nebraska, so that'd be south, almost near Kansas.
Fished it.
Yep, I found quite a flock of turkeys down there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Me and a buddy went and hunted there a couple of years, and I mean the fun part is we got our turkeys. We were able to see and take. We got our limit. Wasn't too much work, but the amount of birds that were on that reservoir in the spring, like the sandhills, the geese, the songbirds, you couldn't. The ducks, they were everywhere. They were landing in our field to feed, but just like I think that the central part of the United States gets overlooked. It's just amazing place.
Tom Vint was a outdoor writer. There was Tom Vint, Bill Vint. They all know them.
Mm-hmm.
And I fished Tom Vint and all the reservoirs in Nebraska, all the little ones, all the way through Nebraska for walleye and bass and stuff. And I heard he's dead and gone now. So, but we were going to McConaughey, and I had my old Mopar, see, and I looked down, there was a turkey, and he was jumping around down there. So we had the DNR gal with us, where she wanted to go fishing with us. So I pulled over the road, and I said, I want to go down there. I said, Ron Scher always kids me about how hard turkeys are to hunt. He's always kidding me. Oh, man, that's a birdie. But I went down there. Well, the damn turkey had his toe in a trap.
Oh, no.
He was jumping up and down. So I grabbed that turkey, and they're really strong.
Oh, yes, they are.
And I'm grabbed that turkey, and here I come back to the car with a turkey underneath my arm. I said, now, Tom, you tell Shara, these turkeys aren't nothing to me.
With it under your arm, even.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Nebraska's a special place. So I grew up in Iowa. That's my motherland, if you will. And I spent a great deal of time fishing on the western half of the state. So I'm curious to know, did you fish Brushy Creek ever? That might have been a little bit newer.
No, I don't think so. No.
How about 3 Mile? Does that ring a bell?
No.
12 Mile?
No, I fished right around Des Moines. I fished Waterloo. I fished
some of those smaller rivers,
the Great Lakes and stuff like that. The Spirit Lake. And
sure.
All the big lakes. And we open up there like we did opener of Wisconsin too. We always fished around Hayward for the openers. Mm-hmm. In the old days.
There's some pretty neat fishing in Iowa that there's a lot of places that just don't get talked about. They're not very big reservoirs. A lot of them are like 1,200 acres.
Bob Jensen?
Yes, I do.
Bob Jensen worked for me for many years.
Really?
Yeah. He's an outdoor writer for us. He did all of our writing and stuff, and he did stuff for the In-Fisherman fishing up at Walker.
So my first job as an outdoor communicator, I had an editor position with the Iowa Sportsman magazine.
Yeah.
And Bob Jensen wrote a column for me for the 3 years I was there.
Yeah.
He did before I got there and did it afterwards, but that's a pretty interesting connection.
Yeah, I took Randy Amrud under my wing, and then he went with Lindy Little Joe when I was still there, and I worked for them for 17 years for Lindy Little Joe, and I even wore I wore that Angler of the Year shirt for the In-Fisherman. But anyway, Bob Jensen, I knew him from the Al Linder's school up there. See, so I put him to work because he could write. And Randy Amrud, he was one of the best guys in store. He had the best laugh, and he could tell stories, and he could fish pretty good.
So this was kind of the crew that you
started the whole thing,
and you guys got to work. So let's start. Let's move on from there.
Yeah.
Your communications. You were tasked with communicating and presenting new techniques, new lures to prospective buyers. You went to store openings, did in-store appearances, things like that. What was that? Was that something that you did individually, or was that in association with In-Fisherman?
Well, In-Fisherman, Lindy. Actually, it was Lindy first.
Right.
And then they went to Lindy Little when they bought out, Railvac bought out Lindy. Remember? And then they just didn't know how to run a business, so they got Can Lam and Nick Adams, who was our boss. And on the first time I met was Nick Adams, Al Linder, Ron Linder, and Dolores was she was the gal in the office in the little tiny place out here by Perch Lake, and that's how I first went to work for them. And they started it there, and then it went. And when they fired the Railvac people, got rid of them, and then we went on the road with Al. So. So he'd say, "Hey, I gotta have you go over here. I gotta have you go to New York. I gotta have you go to Nashville or whatever." I would do the shows. They were 10-day shows then.
Oh yeah, right.
And that was grueling. I'll tell you.
I'm sure. I worked the Iowa State Fair a few years where it was start to finish.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Very long.
That's a long time. Yeah. So that's how I really started. So because Al would say, "Hey, go here, go there," and then they would get with their reps. The whole secret was they had reps in every different states. The Noise Boys, the guys out west, guys out east, and they had that had Lindy. They're selling Lindy, and they would have me come in to fish.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fishing trip. I mean,
Every time. Yeah.
Every time. Yeah.
So the goal was to get the word out across the nation about the Lindy rig and the Lindy program.
Yep, exactly.
And do you feel like that was it attractive to a bass angler in the South, or was it more walleye centric?
Well, it was bass and some walleye then. Yeah, It was bass and some walleye. Well, I remember going to a reservoir, and when we called them the Noise Boys, and that was a rep, and they had a bass deal jamboree, a club, and the guys come in and they were going to put the hurt on the Yankee. So I told the guy with me, one of the guys at the reps, I said, "Can you get me a box of crawlers anywhere?" Yeah. "Oh, yeah, we'll get you some." I said, "Get some big ones." So these guys, they took off, and away they went. They went up the river or something. So this guy said, "I know there's a brush pile out here in the main lake." I said, "Let's go." So we just go around that brush pile. We must have caught 30 bass. I mean, they had a lot. That's when Lindy had a little Ranger boat with a 115 Johnson on it. They had a little Ranger. I got pictures of that at home. I'll show you too. So we had a live well full of bass, and then when we get back to the dock, everybody says, "Let's get back to time to, how'd y'all do?" I said, "Oh, we got a few bass, You open the live well, and their eyes about popped out of their head. They only had a couple.
The Yankee brought.
The old Yankee,
yeah. I spent 5 years in Birmingham, Alabama, so I heard that exact same phrase more than once, and it's funny to see that's been a thing, Gary. I'd say that in recent years you haven't seen on the professional bass tours. There hasn't been a strong northern showing until recently.
Yep.
And now
he won it.
Yep. Jeff Gustafson now.
Yep. Jeffy. Yep.
And then Seth Fighter is a pretty popular name from the cities, and a handful of others. But there's anglers now that are coming out of the north to contend and compete with.
Yeah.
That southern bass angler, which forever was like the standard. They're the guys. They know all those.
You know who Ray Scott is?
Of course. He
came up fishing with me. Brought his sons up.
Really?
And he said, "This is the first time my boys have never been out of my yard in my pond."
Wow.
I took them to Mission Lake, and we just clobbered.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
How about
I took
that?
him and his boys. Then Hank Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll never forget this because Billy Linder was taking photos. He was in the water, and Ron Linder was in a boat. He wanted to take pictures of Ray Scott, of the kids, his boys. And then poor Billy, he's changing film, and he drops that first roll of film in the drink. Oh, Ron Linder, of course, he just blew up, Poor Billy, I'll never forget that. Poor Billy, I felt so bad for him. Then we took Hank Parker on mission. Hank Parker, now he's a crazy dude. And then I filmed him with him up to a Menaki where I had my tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a show up there, and I got him some nice big 7-8 pound walleyes up there. And he did the show, but he couldn't remember the bottom bouncer, the name of the bottom bouncer. So funny.
So in the days that when In-Fisherman kind of exploded onto the scene, they were Al sat right there and told me the story of the, how they sent out the first magazine, and then they got all these checks in. They had like stacks and stacks of checks and money coming in, and they're like, I guess we're doing a magazine, because he said we could have took all the money and run, but we knew that people wanted to have good fishing communication, good fishing content in those days, and that really, took the fishing world by storm. And being, I think we'd all agree that we're, generally northern anglers are pigeonholed to the north. Like, well, what you talk about, what you do up there works where you're at. And you just told a story where that, proved otherwise. But as the fishing world began to accept and understand the value of the information In-Fisherman was putting out there, talk a little bit about how you began to contribite to that and how you helped grow that brand.
Bobby Murray was their first guy on their magazine. You remember that? Here you should. I asked the guys here yesterday when I came in here. I said, "You got the magazine?" Doug, I stopped in yesterday, make sure I could find the place.
Sure.
Because there's so much growed up around here. But anyway, Bobby Murray was on their first magazine, and their first magazine, they come out with it, but they didn't take advertising.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they advertised, but they didn't take money for it. And they soon figured out you got to have money to do a magazine. Then that was after the Murray one. So you should have a saying, those guys over here, dig out that magazine. That was their first magazine.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I've seen it was more of a pamphlet that first time around, right?
Yeah, well, it was a pretty.
Was it an actual magazine?
Yeah.
I know I have the first official In-Fisherman magazine, the red and white cover. Is that the one you're talking about?
Well, see, I came out with Break Lines, the Break Lines magazine, a little pamphlet. We handed always to the dealers, and all my guys had. I just ordered from over here, Detroit Lakes. All my guys handed them out. Every one of the dealer stores they went into was actually a deal to get in there. Mm-hmm. Well, after it was so successful, they come out with a Walleye Insider. So I was telling Linda, I said, "You copied me, you bugger."
Of course they did. And in those days, that was largely to support, or was it a magazine before it was support to the tournament trail? What was the order that
I don't know. It was the Insider talked about walleye all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know that the PWT, the way successful tournaments have always worked is they had to have a media source behind them to kind of get the word out. So were you involved in the initial year of the PWT?
Oh yeah, I fished them all.
Every one of them.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. What a time! What a time to be alive.
Oh. All over the country, you might say, PWT, yeah. Jim Kelkoff, and well, I would actually MC the tournaments over in Winnebago for their little, and then that's how I met Jim Kelkoff, before they even had that. See, so then we did a few tournaments here, just local tournaments that we would do, and then when they come on with this bigger one, then oh man, it was like the tournament down in Mille Lacs. There used to be 250 people in that one. Mm-hmm. That was a tough one to beat too.
Sure.
But no, that was a start of a heck of a deal there. I'll tell you.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
followed up was a magazine, the Walleye Insider, to keep everybody posted. It was just a hell of a success.
Well, and everybody wanted to be a part of that. I mean, I did not attend any PWT in my day, but I started covering tournaments when it was the FLW when they were doing that. But the PWT carries such weight with anglers. They often talk about that being the golden age, if you will, of competitive walleye fishing. And of course, things have changed. But talk a little bit about how the community interest was when the PWT would come to town.
Oh, it was like, hey, come on in, we'll pay for what you need. Mm-hmm. When Kelkoff would go into an area, say, we're thinking about having a tournament here, man, they would all be for it, and they'd get everything all organized and the money what they needed to do it, to get it going. Oh, yeah.
How big were the fields in those days?
Oh, they were lots of guys, yeah. I can't remember how many, but there were lots of guys.
150? Oh,
I would imagine, yeah. Yeah, I would imagine. I had a tournament going in Canada for 35 years. It was a Canadian American tournament there. They used my name, Mr. Walleye, out in a tournament at Menaki.
Okay.
Yeah, so we run that too. Plus, I fish all the circuits here.
Golly, I remember my first job covering a tournament was a walleye derby. So it's always been close to my heart. And, things have certainly changed over the years. But talk a little bit about some of your favorite places that the PWT went. Was it all the way out west? Did it go all the way east? How far did that organization
Montana. Yeah, Fort Peck.
Fort Peck.
Yeah, awesome reservoir, Fort Peck, and then the Dakotas. I fished the Missouri River, Lake Erie, all the way to Cleveland, South is in the reservoirs in the south. And
Bull Shoals, was that one?
Bull Shoals.
You fished there?
Them were tough ones, yeah.
I've heard those are tough fish to catch.
They were tough ones, yeah, because we didn't know that much about those reservoirs, and. Yeah, they had it all over. I mean, they were all over the country.
Did you have one that was your favorite? You always look forward to going to?
I liked Erie. I had the record catch there, record weight, for a while, and I don't know how it still held up. I had like 118 pounds.
That's a big limit of walleye.
29, 30-inch fish.
Yeah,
but I'd fish that. Before the tournaments, I'd fish Lindy Little Joe, because I would go out to Port Clinton, and that's the reps that was out there. Hugh Edwards and Bill Wigington. Can I remember these? I don't even know if I can remember these. And they said, man, you guys got to get out there. But they're just killing the walleyes out there. I don't think there was a take home limit. I don't know how many walleyes we cleaned in a Holiday Inn under their desk. I don't. They cleaned a bunch of them.
I'm sure.
But yeah, you could go out there and get an average 28, 29 inches, 30 inches. Yeah.
So what kind of boat were you using on Lake Erie?
Just my little boat.
Yeah.
Just my little boat, and then I had a console boat, center console that we had, and then we got to the bigger boats. But then we'd always go and show the guys with the big old sport crafts how to fish. Try to show those guys how to fish. Well, it was pretty easy because you had a mile of walleyes, You could go through and you put a Red Devil spinner on at a bottom bouncer, and it would just, it was unbelievable.
That's amazing.
And then what I always remembered was the jig fishing on the reefs there at Port Clinton. Could you imagine 2 million walleyes spawning on the reefs? If you catch one, there'd be 4 following it up. They were so thick. The Toussaint Reef, we called it Fuzzy Grub Reef because we lost so many jigs in them snaggy rocks, but that's where the walleyes were. And they didn't fish the reefs ever until I got there. Honest to God, they never fished. They fished the river, and they never even used minnows. They would just cast a jig out in plastic or whatever, but they never used minnows, whatever it was, and they would set the hook and snag them. And the game wardens were taking notes.
Sure.
But anyway, so hey, I told Jim Frawfish, he's dead and gone, and his boy's dead and gone now. Rick LaCourse, he's all dead and gone. That's what happens when you live this old, So I said, anybody got a bucket of minnows? Anybody got a boat in? Bob Chase says, yeah. And I fished with Bob during the tournament. We won it. And he said, what do you need the minnows for? I said, you guys ever put minnows on the jigs? No, I don't know. So they got me a bucket of minnows, and Bob had his big old boat in. We went out there. Oh, it was just unbelievable.
A heyday.
Oh, unbelievable. You'd catch one, the 4 be following.
And big ones.
Oh, yeah. So it was like unbelievable. So then I fished with him as a tournament guy too. So we won some money too. So Jim Frawfish won at one time, and Jerry Myers was one of the oldest guys. He's dead and gone now. I always kept contact with Jerry, and we went out there and I fished a tournament. We won that one on Lake Erie by casting spinners, single spin spinners, casting them out with a piece of crawler on it, And just before we left, he said, we got to go. We got to get in there. I said, one cast. One boom. We get about another 8-9 pounder or so. We won the tournament. Port Clinton put in bay.
I've been there. I almost stepped on a nesting swan there once, and she almost
you had to
had
be
me.
careful to step on the girls on the docks too.
Yeah, that's true.
Careful.
That's true. I met Mark Kortz
Oh, yeah.
on the docks at Port Clinton, and we've been friends ever since.
Good man.
One of my favorites.
Yeah,
We've
he's
had
a
a lot of
good
fun.
guy, yeah.
And Ross Grothy, another
Yep.
guy that I've spent a lot of time with, another good friend of mine, and of course, Tommy Scarless was
Yep.
How's
he doing now? Is he still alive?
Nope, Tommy passed away a few years
That's
ago.
what I thought.
Yeah, he got forgive me, but the frontal lobe.
Good old Iowa boy.
Yeah, I bring him up because he was a mentor of mine, and just a key part of my story. I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for Tommy.
He won the tournament, and he told me what he was doing, and I didn't do it. So
he was good for telling you what he was doing. You know, he's
he was over the river, the Saginaw River, coming into Big Lake Erie, and he was fishing the tips and tops of the rocks, you know, by the electrical plant. Yeah.
Guy was talented, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He knew how to find fish of all sorts. He was good at catching bass, good at catching walleyes.
Yeah.
Said he could catch muskies. I never saw him do it, but he said he could.
Yeah.
But miss that guy. Yeah, there's some legendary stories that occurred on these walleye trails, and you know, I think that I think they're still viable. You know, the NWC is still around. I think that's one of the longest running tournament trails in the country, and you fished that one too, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very enjoyable lifetime. I'll tell you that.
That's for sure.
I still got the urge to go do it again.
I can tell you do. I can tell you do. So what do you think the difference is in like a pressured walleye? How do you overcome catching pressured walleye compared to a fish that doesn't see a lure very often? What's the best way to talk one into eating?
More finesse.
Slow down,
more finesse. Finer stuff, just fine tune.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you got to keep changing and kind of rolling with the punches.
And what I really got at was a friend of mine, Steve Bissett, who was one of the best lead line guys there ever was. And he knew how to troll lead. And he taught me a lot about trolling lead, you know, lead core. Mm-hmm. And because he had Parkinson's, and I was heading down Iowa to do a hunt down there with my guy in the southwestern part of Iowa, and I called him up, said, "How you doing, Steve? How you feeling?" "Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there." So I said, "Well, got a while before we can go to the docks on Bar Harbor." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, Roach," he said, "you'll outlive me. You're gonna outlive me anyway." And when I got back, he died of a heart attack.
Oh no.
That was a bad day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was a good guy, but he knew how to do the lead and get the lead out. Crankbaits and stuff, little crankbaits, and hell, he caught big muskies with lead line. I mean,
really?
On Mille Lacs. 57 inches.
Yeah, how about that?
You know, and he would troll the shallow, 17, 18 foot of water to catch the big walleyes. And with the cranking, you know, he'd run 4 colors out of deep water, 3 colors, 2 colors, 2.5 colors, you know, and he knew just exactly how far that bait was going, what kind of bait.
So I've done lead core with some guys a time or two before. I don't have a lot of experience in it, but would you still consider it a worthwhile style of catching walleyes in today's day and age?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Talk a little bit about how it works. You mentioned colors. What's that mean?
Well, how I rig it up, I run a 25-foot leader, 10 pound.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people run 50. I'd run a 25-foot leader. You know how to tie it on. And I didn't run the lead is a 18-pound lead. It's every 30 feet there's a color.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's real simple. You get a big enough reel, and I even use it on counter reels too. So I get right down to the nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm.
And I use it for lake trout. You know, I mean fishing lake trout 90 feet up there with lead. You know. And I got lures that'll go down to 95 feet and go through them lake trout, and they like to chase. You know, all fish like to chase.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned how to do that through Steve, and then just practice and stuff like that. And you'd be surprised, North Long Lake, middle of the lake. Why are the fish out there in the middle of the lake? They're supposed to be in a weed line, right? They live out there too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I catch bass, northern pike, everything out there, just suspended.
On lead core.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So basically the goal is you're using the line essentially as a weight to get down to the
it's got
proper
lead,
running depth.
Got a strand of lead in it,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And the different colors are 30 feet?
And then every color, every bait, it got a different lip on it too.
Yep.
See?
So there's a lot of math you have to do.
Oh, you dang right.
Yeah. How did you did you have a preferred crankbait, or did you just kind of adapt to what you think they wanted, or was there a couple in particular you always relied on?
Well, I use Smithwick's, one of my favorite baits,
Mm-hmm.
Smithwick's. and I had Rampola for a sponsor. I went in there and told Craig Weber, I said, Craig, you guys need to get another bait in your arsenal. What do you mean? I said, you see this? It's silver, one with a black back, then one silver with an orange belly. I said, when a bait goes like this, what color do the fish see? They see the bottom.
They see the bottom.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you got dirty water? Do you want to have the fish see you? You put an orange belly on the dirty water.
Mm-hmm.
Simple.
Do you think lures have gotten too? I actually wrote about this in a recent the bass guide. This year's bass guide. I talked about you really only need 2 colors of frogs, a dark frog and a light frog. And I said, remember, frog's belly is white.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that colors are important to walleyes. I would say there's probably not a more color-oriented fish than a walleye. But can you still get by with a handful of colors, you think, when chasing walleyes?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you like to have a lot of color options?
I use dirty water, bright colors,
Mm-hmm.
oranges and stuff, chartreuses. In clear water, I use silvers. I blackback silver,
Mm-hmm.
tulipies.
Blackback silver.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite for clear water. Yeah, and bluebacks too. Now bluebacks too are really good. Mille Lacs is a blueback.
Okay.
For that.
Do you think the watercolor has something to do with that variant?
The bait goes like this,
Mm-hmm.
shines. Rolls too. If there's a fish over here, there's a fish down here, down deep.
Mm-hmm.
If you see them down deep, just let out more lead.
I some of my walleye friends have got boxes, right, of different spinner colors and beads, and Tommy Scarless was notorious for he had to have certain colors of beads in a certain order, right? And he, in his mind, he knew that there's a reason they want that. He didn't maybe know the exact reason why, but he appealed to what the fish were wanting.
It might be only the one bead they want. See.
Mm-hmm. So you think are walleyes that particular? They can be.
They're pretty particular. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. To get them to turn on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then
sometimes fast trolling, see?
Yeah. So the key was staying flexible and trying different things. We started out talking about that. And it still seems to be the case today.
Don't get locked up, Yeah, the walleyes are they're after something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Perch colored ones, the perch colored baits. I did stuff for Pradco. I designed a whole bunch of lures for Pradco and colors. And boy, they got beautiful colors.
Yeah.
And I left Rapala, went with Pradco, and Mark Fisher he didn't want to do our whole team, so we just left him and we did our own thing. So he's retired now. I told him, I said, you lost some good people.
Yeah, a lot of water under the bridge too those days.
And I got a booklet at home of it's a black booklet, about so square, with all the stuff. When you come out, I'll show you something of the life of this old guy.
Mm-hmm.
How he started. So then I showed this to Tony Roach and Trig Roach. Now Trig is Randy's boy, and he's going to be becoming a fisherman too, and he'll be in the Hall of Fame down there. Tony will be there in probably 3 years because he has to be 50.
Mm-hmm.
Now are you going to the Hall of Fame dinner?
I might be out of town this year.
Oh,
for that,
that's too bad.
Yeah, I haven't missed one in a couple of years, but we'll see. To be determined yet.
Yeah.
But the story of In-Fisherman has intrigued me for so long. When I was in 4th grade, I got introduced to the video series and just really wanted to.
Yeah.
I at the time I didn't realize how extensive their library was and how much you had contributed to that. And let's talk a little bit about your first experiences doing the TV show.
It's just living the dream, or just living. I mean, not even living the dream, because I didn't know what the dream was.
Right.
But just living how I live, and from rowing the boat on Oldie Flaskus to how things changed. And when I met Al, first time I met him, he said, "Let's go fishing." So we went on. His dad was with, and of course we had a couple toddies, and his dad said, "Let me on shore." And he says, "I want to go home." So anyway, so Al and I went fishing, and we just hit it off, and we've been friends. I think friends for a long time. I did a lot of stuff with that guy and with that guy, and the whole family, you might say. So, but and I learned some stuff from those guys for sure. Definitely for sure what they do and how fast they fish. And I just put it up here and wrote it down and did it, you know. And poor Beverly, she's the one that deserves it all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, her and Mary, and you know, all the times that we were gone and stuff, she raised the kids and did a heck of a good job.
You know, that is a tough part of the job that we've had to work in. And I worked at Bassmaster for 5 years. I covered all the events, and so I was on the road for 20 plus weeks a year. And you know, I think that having somebody at home that kind of understands the vision, right? It's impossible without her.
Yep.
Without my wife Catherine. So we had to commit. Like, I'm not going to be on the road for 20 weeks a year for 20 years, but right now that's what we had to do.
Yeah.
And it led us to here, and ultimately a dream come true that I didn't know what was coming, but I never anticipated doing In-Fisherman TV, because that was what got me interested in the business, Gary. That was my inspiration as a kid.
Yeah.
Now, my dad would tell you I have a good face for radio, and here we are using cameras and radio so where everybody gets the experience.
Yeah.
But the TV thing wasn't very intimidating for me. It was at first, but it was something I picked up pretty easy, or at least open my mouth and words fall out. You know, things happen. But the way that In-Fisherman TV was filmed when you started doing it was very different.
Oh.
Can you talk us through like how filming a show would have gone in your early days?
It was just wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was get her done. Yeah. Yeah, all, you know, and I run the boat for Al, you know, and a camera boat and stuff for lots of times, you know, to run the camera. And they would just go fishing, you know. And we'd go to the river. Always, right now, this time of the year, we'd be at a Red Wing, you know. So, and one little story is funny because we forgot to put gas in the tank.
Been there.
So we go to the landing, and Ron's boat was there. And so he exchanged gas cans. And, of course, Ron run out of gas by the island there.
You didn't tell him?
No. You know, and boy, we heard Ron hooting and hollering. I'll tell you what. Al says, hey, you better take this can. And I had to go up the goddamn bank way up there in the gas station right there. And I had to carry 5 gallons of gas down that rocky start down
Sure.
there. So I'll never forget that. Al said, we better go get him some gas. Oh yeah, we always doing tricks and stuff like that on those guys.
I've heard some stories about.
Oh, Ron, yeah, he's a character, yeah. But yeah, he was a dandy guy, yeah.
So in the early days of TV production, did you spend time? How often were you prepared? Like, did you go out a couple days in advance and almost pre-fish and know the fish there?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, we heard they were biting. You know, we could find fish. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In those days, you know, if you go to Wisconsin, Hayward, there, all those lakes were just full of fish. You know. I took Ron Sher over there, and we went to one of the big lakes, Grindstone Lake. You know, that was the toughest lake in the world. You couldn't catch a fish there, catch smallmouth. So I said, Ron, let's quit trying to catch that one big fish in that lake. Let's go for another lake. So we took him to the other lake. We just killed him. You know, so I've taken Ron fishing for many, many years. Ron Shera. Mm-hmm. So I still got to teach him how to clean fish.
I don't clean fish either, Gary. I'm no good at it. I've got a 17-year-old boy that's got it mastered, so I don't have to do it.
All right, okay.
And that makes my wife happy because she knows I've never been good at cleaning fish, and I don't eat a lot of fish.
I'll show you how.
I don't want to know.
I'll show you.
Yeah, I'll take your lessons, yes, sir. But I'm not real good with a fillet knife. But anyways, she's insisted on us having some fresh fish as often
17.
as possible.
He's 17.
Yep, and so he does it. She lets him do it in the kitchen sink.
Well, you know, I'm on a whitefish kick now. It's called stangy.
Yeah. Well,
and those are a tricky fish to catch.
They're tricky to clean too, I understand.
No. They flay just like a.
Do they really?
They flay like a lake trout.
Okay.
A beautiful white meat, and they got bone structure just the same as a lake trout, and they fight just like a lake trout. We're catching them like 25, 26 inches. Mm-hmm. Not the little tulip. These are whitefish, thick. Mm-hmm. And they fry up as good as, and they eat just as good as any walleye you ever had. Oh, yeah. I smoked them and also fry them. In fact, we had whitefish last night.
I've heard people like to smoke them. What's your seasoning of choice?
I use my Mr. Walleye batter, Mr. Walleye fish batter.
That's right. I forgot all about that, Gary.
Yeah.
Well, what's in it?
Secret.
You got to buy it to find out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a fish batter, and you how long do you smoke them for?
Well, my nephew's got a smokehouse all completely controlled,
Mm-hmm.
and turn the temperature up 200 degrees or whatever it is, and then he's got a wood stove that goes in on the side and pulls the smoke in there, and he put a little oak, white oak, or apple, or whatever you want to smoke it with,
Mm-hmm.
and he runs that stove in there, runs it for about 12 hours. But you got to get them cooked first, and then you smoke them. Get them hot first, then you smoke them.
Really? For 12 hours?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'll bet that's got a great smoky flavor.
Oh, awesome, awesome. I've done this for years. In fact, I smoke fish. I had my wife had a refrigerator out there,
Mm-hmm.
and she would put them in. I'd get them all ready. I'd put them in I like 1 cup of salt to 8 cups of water. And then if you need more, you need another cup of salt, 8 more cups, and I'd put the fish in there after I fillet them all out.
Mm-hmm.
And I fillet them out instead of, I take the bones out, might say, the rib bones, I fillet them out so it's all beat. And then I smoke them, put them in the smokehouse. And I actually take them out of that water, I wash them off, clean them, and then put them in the smoker.
Mm-hmm.
And smoke them till they're golden brown.
I'll bet they're delicious. I'm getting hungry all of a
They're
sudden.
awesome, yeah.
So where does how far do you have to travel to get big enough whitefish? Are they local or
Yeah.
they're just around?
You can go to 10 Mile. You can go to Leech.
Mm-hmm.
10 Mile, I don't know what the limit is. Leech is like 25 fish.
Mm-hmm.
And in the center of the lake, that whole strip that goes down the center of the lake. And
The trench, they
Stony
call it,
Point.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you get them out there. And they're hard to catch.
I was going to ask you what the secret was.
They're
to catch
really
them.
tricky to catch.
Probably finesse.
I use, and I rig up my rods with 2-pound diameter braid, 4-pound test. My middle light rods, crappie rods that I use, that I designed for crappies. Then I take my little buckshot rattle spoon. It's just a little Northland with a little treble hook on it, and I put a piece of crawler on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just go along the break line until I see a blip, and then if it's just one fish, don't even bother because they won't even look at it. See 2, you might come up. If you see 3 in one little pod here, you're going to have competition. So one will come up and the other one will come up by it. The other one comes shooting by it. And boom, they'll pop it. And you'll never feel the bite unless you have that braid on. And we're catching them anywhere from 35 to 45, 50 feet, 60 feet. So I just run the break line on Whitefish Lake. It's a Whitefish Lake for whitefish. And I'll tell you, they fight like a bugger.
They do fight. A group of buddies and I went to Lake of the Woods on a fall muskie trip, and I had a friend of my brother-in-law caught I don't know how big, but it was huge. I'd have to show you a picture. I mean, it was like this long.
The record is 14 pounds out of Lake of the Woods.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that big, but it was
we're
still
catching
impressive.
5, 6, 7 pounders.
Sure.
And a lot of them are like 4 pounds, 4.5 pounds.
Do you catch them during the spring, summer, fall? Do you do the
all
ice
day,
fishing
all
thing
year,
too?
Yeah, as soon as it warms up, and as soon as it opener, and I go there and they'll be in 30, 35 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes less.
Do you need to be like too much wind? Does that affect how you're able to present?
Yeah.
So you
It's
need
hard to control.
Okay, so you need it to be a calm.
And what I do, and I put a bobber stop.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have rods, if I have 2 guys with me, I'll put a bobber stop at 40 feet because that's where the fish. I'll mark it to where the fish I'm seeing the most of. See, so I drop the lure down, and then I mount my bobber stop up just above where they are. So then I'll do that with all my other rods too. See, I fish 2 guys, 1 guy. Excuse me. God dang it.
There's a bottle of water there for you if you'd like it.
Yeah. Oh, I got to get a cough drop. Anyway, so that's what I do. And I just run the break line till you see blip, 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 blip.
Mm-hmm.
And then fish them. And some will get it. And you lose quite a few. Hank Ebert, the Hank Ebert, he's a paraplegic. He's had his back broke. And he's a guide, Nisswa guide. So he's got a little boat. He can't get into my boat. So we take his little old Ranger, and we got 7 one day. We're heroes then.
That's a pretty good day for you. Is catch the 7
big
of them.
day. Oh, a huge day.
So they're a pretty persnickety
Well, they
fish.
fight and twist so much that they rip out that soft mouth. Gee, they got a sucker mouth,
That's right.
but it's more out in front instead of on the bottom.
And they're very dense. I feel like they're dense fish. like they're heavier than what they look.
Oh,
Do you agree?
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're solid. Yeah,
Okay.
solid bait. Yeah.
So you said you're on the whitefish kick right now. That's I know that Doug just went out to I think Green Bay and did a trip out there, brought some home, and I think we've got some whitefish being pickled downstairs.
Yeah, he
right
told me
now.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm anxious to try it. I've
Yeah.
discovered I like pickled fish. I didn't think I would, but I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, some of it's good if they do it right. Yeah, I have
Mm-hmm.
a recipe for that too in my cookbook. Yeah.
So fishing for you has been a passion, but the eating fish seems to be something you're passionate about too. When you said you have a couple options for breading and
Oh,
seasoning,
yeah.
talk about that a little bit. How'd that come about?
Yeah, I came up with a breading many years ago. I called it shore lunch. That was my original one.
I've heard of that before.
Yeah, and the name, see, and I named it that. Well, we got involved with the Capras down there, and I got, not taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So I lost that name because they trademarked it, or the company trademarked it, flour company.
Mm-hmm.
So I left that, and then I went to a guy in Michigan, not Michigan, but Ashton, Illinois, and we come up with this recipe. We tried. It took a year before we get it just right. And but we've been doing that for, a long 40 years, I suppose, with this stuff here. We sell it to U.S. Foods. We sell it to Cisco, all the restaurants and stuff. And now Beverly doesn't want to do it anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
I just talked to Steve this morning. I said, Steve, I don't think I'm going to have to do that fish batter anymore because Beverly's tired of it.
Well,
Yeah,
many years.
You could fry them.
Yeah.
It's good for frying, for bacon. But I use it on chicken, fish, pork chops, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
What's the exact name of it again?
it's called Mr. Walleye Special. Mr. Walleye's batter mix. Mr.
Okay.
Walleye's batter mix. Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure I get some here. That's intriguing.
Yeah. We'll have to do it. Get you a sample.
I will take you up on it. Like
Yeah,
I
when
said,
you come out to the house, we'll get you a sample.
well, I'm going to take you up on that, Gary. We've been talking about that. I
Yeah.
definitely want to experience some of your memorabilia that you have, and I think that after spending as many years in the business as you have,
Oh.
you just what a cool life. I mean, a neat
Yeah.
story, and I have more questions. We're not wrapping this up just
No.
yet, but I mean, like just
August 3rd is my birthday,
mm-hmm,
and I'll be 88.
88. I think you told me the other day you're the oldest one right now.
Yeah.
Oldest.
Oldest one of the other guys. All the guys. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I heard Joel Fallergy. Now he's hurting too. He's not doing very good, the old guy. I guess he's in a nursing home, the old guy. So Steve, I haven't seen where he's at. He was kind of a flaky guy. You have different guys, kind of a different guy. He fished the tournaments a little bit.
So we got opener, about a little over a month and a half away.
Yeah.
How often are you fishing nowadays?
Oh, a lot.
Every day?
Yeah, a lot. Whatever. Yeah. Yeah, whatever. I like Winnie is my favorite. One of my favorite lakes for opener.
Mm-hmm.
I've been fishing that lake since I've been this high. My brother and my dad used to take me up, put in the river, come out and fish right in front of the sugar bar.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have a locator. They just threw an anchor out and cast. You'd get northerns, you'd get walleyes, everything, whatever, in the river, the mouth of the river. So last year, guess where I was at?
At the mouth of
The
the
mouth
river?
of the river, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
So, funny story. I fished the North Central Bass Club. That's the group that you fish by yourself. It's a singles deal. And
Oh, yeah.
the championship was on Big Winnie.
Oh,
last
yeah.
year. And
Really?
I had no idea the quality of largemouth in that lake.
In Big Cutfoot?
I actually fished. Well, I hopped around a little bit. I came out of Cutfoot and went way to the west, the northwest corner. Three Rivers. Does that sound right?
Yeah, okay, up in there, in that whole slough area.
Yeah, that big slough area.
Oh, yeah, it's big flat, yeah.
Yep, lots of fish in there. And then I went over to the east side where the river goes out of the lake and fished around in there and caught some too. Like it was just,
The dam was.
yeah, but out on the main lake edge.
And largemouth.
Mm-hmm. Largemouth.
Little Cutfoot, you did little Cutfoot.
The guy that won it did little Cutfoot, so
Yeah.
I obviously didn't select right. I did okay. I
Yeah.
did all right, but not good enough.
Yeah.
But that lake it's neat how it's such an enormous lake.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's a renowned walleye fishery.
Yep.
But there are elements of it that just get overlooked. And as an example, largemouth fishery there is tremendous. It's as good as any lake I've fished around the area.
Oh, wow.
But
Wow.
it was a lot of fun.
I never did that. When I guided for Marv Kep, I fished bass a lot, you know. The old days.
They're deep in the salad, Gary. I can tell you that, way deep in there.
Yeah.
But did you ever caught smallmouth out of that lake?
No, I've never caught a smallmouth in a weenie.
Yeah, I wonder why. I mean, I know the river goes
Leech,
through it.
no,
But...
leech is smallmouth. Caught smallmouth on leech fishing a tournament there.
Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. You said that they stocked Mille Lacs with smallies. Were there not smallies in there originally?
No.
Really?
No.
Wow, I had no idea. Do you know about what year that was when they started?
No, I don't know. Al would know. He likes smallmouth, you know.
Yep.
I have a little fun. I said, boy, them smallmouth sure are good eating.
Well, you put anything in Mr. Walleye's
batter mix.
batter mix, it tastes
like
real good.
walleye. Everything tastes like walleye when you use that. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I was always under the assumption it was a natural fishery, but I mean, so there weren't muskies in there originally. There weren't smallmouth in there originally, but there had to have been walleyes.
Walleyes. Oh, tons of walleyes. Yeah, what a lake. Yeah, the wintertime, summertime. Yeah. And there used to be so many eel pout, you know, and I would take eel pout or perch. You know, they would throw perch all around the fish houses out there. They would never keep a perch. So I'd go out there and drive around there, and I'd pick up buckets of them. And I'd take them over to Wisconsin, and I fish the nuclear plants over there.
Mm-hmm.
I would stop at our favorite bar over there, you know, for having a few toddies, and we'd bring them perch. Oh, man, you didn't have to buy a drink all day, you know. You know, they just loved them perch.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and of course it's personal preference. I think a yellow perch out of the ice might be the best tasting fish on the planet.
Them and bluegills are the best. They are the best.
You agree?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're special, especially when you get the right size ones.
We were just up, Tony and I were just up to Cass, and you know, a week or so ago, and we got a limit perch, but they was running smaller this year, so they're getting a lot of pressure.
Well, they're real big on Mille Lacs this year. I'm sure you've been seeing that.
Yeah.
And then I saw they just here
dropped it.
They changed the limit, which
5. Well, last time they did this, they cleaned them. They cleaned them out.
They did.
Yeah, they cleaned them out. I was out there. I got out there a couple of times, you know. You know, and of course, and that was before Tony, you know. And man, we go out those big old jumbos. Yeah.
So one of my guide friends out there was telling me that the incoming year classes, there's a couple of year classes that are all very strong.
Yeah.
And that some of the goal was, and I'm not a biologist, so I can't speak to how this works, but some of the goal with this year was to get a lot of those bigger top end fish out of there to reduce a little pressure on the forage base, so that those incoming year classes that are within 3 to 4 years of that top one had some food to rely on as well. I don't know if I know the reality of that, but are you familiar with that type of mentality, or does it make sense?
What I think.
Let's have it.
Have you ever fish smallmouth in the shallows? You know, and anything that moves in the shallows gets eaten. There ain't a minnow or nothing that gets by a smallmouth in there. So when a walleye spawns, and I talked to what's his name, their head, Parsons is your head fishery guy now. I said, Mr. Parsons, he just got the job. Says, don't you think that there's so much netting of all this netting that's going on, and by all these beautiful walleyes full of eggs and stuff? Oh, there's plenty of spawn in the lake. He said, oh, really? I said, you know, plus the bass, anything that hatches, there ain't a minnow that gets by the shallow water without a bass eating it. You know, I mean, I fish enough minnows, you know, and I fish enough. And I get people that don't know how to fish, that can't cast. I put a slip bobber on for them, and it's just bite,
it's easy.
bite.
Yeah.
You know, it's just wear their arms right out. You know. In fact, the guy I hunt with down in Iowa, Bill Decker, caught a 23.5-inch smallmouth.
That's a real big one.
That's the most. I'm getting it mounted for him. But I says, you know, when I hand it to him, he doesn't know that yet. When I hand it to him, I want a 186 whitetail buck now.
Yeah, that's right.
Tied up.
That's a fair trade, I'd say. So the one of the factors for the walleye, I guess the walleye, for them to have a successful spawn, that fry, as soon as they hatch, they have to get out of the path of the smallmouth, and that's very hard.
Yeah, and the perch too.
The perch, okay.
See, and actually, it's, in the perch spawn, it's usually the little walleyes that eat the perch babies. All my tiny perch stuff. When they hatch. So, and I seen the time, what that is. Oh well, I'll tell you a story. I get a call from the Walter Reed Hospital for the veterans are. At first, I get a call from a guy from Iraq. Well, Beverly says he got a call. I said, who is it? It's so-and-so, Chuck. Where's he from? Iraq. Yeah. He calls my phone. So I said, hello. He said, my name's Chuck. You don't know me. He said, I got a friend. I said, you're his fishing hero. And he said he just had a bomb go blast and Doc took both of his legs off. Oh. He said he's in Walter Reed. He says, could you give him a call? Yeah, this is like 12, 13 years ago. So I said, I sure the hell will. So I went over and took the phone from Bev and called him up. And this gal answered. And I said, can I talk to Andrew? And she said, oh, he's napping right now. I said, he might want to take this call. So anyway, she handed the phone to him. And it was like he woke up. I said, hello, Andrew. How the heck you doing? Who is this? Gary Roach. Was dead silence. Can you imagine, out of the clear blue?
Yeah.
He said, oh, my God, I wish my dad was here. So then I asked him, Andrew, I said, when are you coming back? When are you coming home? He said, well, in October, so I want to meet my troops. I said, hey, maybe can we get a day of going fishing? Oh, my God. He said, can we? Yeah. So I said, well, I picked a day, calendar. I called him up. And it was 3 days, like beautiful, all in a row. Took him into a little hole in the wall. We caught our 60 perch. Him and Chuck was with. And we caught all the perch, and we went out and caught a bunch of walleyes, a northern pike or two. I said, I'm getting hungry. Beverly, can you fry some fish for us? Oh, yeah. So we go all the way from Mille Lacs all the way home. I'm like 30 miles. We're sitting there cleaning fish, and Chuck couldn't clean with a darn, but Andrew could clean. So we get all these fish, and we get my limit of 20, and free fries them up. So they add their limit to take home with them, see? And we're out there cleaning, and pretty soon I have a few deer in my backyard, and this giant 5x5 walks in the yard and looks up at us, He's probably looking for something to eat, He said, oh, my God. He said, I want to live here. He said, I want to live here. So ever since then, I got him into a Lund boat, the motor, the whole thing. The Lund took care of him, and he said, you saved my life, he says. He said, I had my buddies commit suicide. He says, 3 of them. So he got him going. So I just talked to him again the other day. I says, we're getting overdue. We're getting overdue. He said,
you know what, Gary? I think fishing is a universal language that brings people together.
Yeah.
That are at all different sorts of walks of life. They're in different parts of their life. They're I stumbled into In-Fisherman when I was at a low point as a little kid, right? It was a part that redirected my every thought, Yeah. And you have the same story. Al has the same story. Doug has a story. Everybody that has this passion for the sport.
Yeah.
It's something that we love ourselves, but when you can share it with somebody like that, does it get any better?
No, that's good. I remember Doug the first time he come up here. And he went ice fishing. He went going across the crack, and he went through.
No, Doug did? Were you with him? No? Oh, that's
we kidded him a little bit.
I haven't heard that story. I'll bring that up next time he sits down with me.
Yeah, get higher boots, higher overshoot.
Have you ever gone through the ice?
Nope, never have.
I never have either.
No.
I did one time, and it was not fishing, and it wasn't a dangerous situation. I was going out to the woods to deer hunt, and I had to cross this little creek. I grew up in Iowa, so I had a
beaver dam. I went through a beaver dam.
Okay, but you're able to get out of that pretty easy, I suppose. Not too deep.
Yeah.
But I foolishly tried to run across what I thought was thin ice, and I didn't know how deep it was. Ended up going up to my hip, so I filled my boot with water. And I'm like, well, it's November in Iowa. I'm going to go get in the tree stand. Yeah. Gary, I sat for a half hour and I couldn't take it anymore.
No.
I was frozen. My pants were solid, and I ended up. You could hardly feel my foot the rest of the day. But that's as close as I've been. But yeah, so fishing is a common language. I think that people, it's easy for us to get caught up in I want to catch a bass. I want to catch a muskie. I want to catch a walleye, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I do it all.
Yeah, pursue what makes you happy. But I
Yeah.
think it's almost an innate, inherent language we all have that when you start talking about fishing with other people that love fishing,
Yeah.
people just open up and
Well, like
brings us together.
Alaska, the guys had invited me up to their camp up in Alaska and catch a big halibut. Beverly's caught a 120-pound halibut. They catch, salmon and silvers and halibut and everything, and then go to Cabo San Lucas and we had a timeshare down there, and we caught marlin. 25 marlin one day,
Mm-hmm.
which is unheard of. They're all, not the big marlin, but they're nice, the 120 pounders. But
Mm-hmm.
and then to be able to do that, man, fly down there and next day you're on the water catching marlin,
Mm-hmm.
and mahi, that's Beverly's favorite.
Oh, they're good eating, aren't they?
Oh yeah,
Especially fresh
That's
like
the
that.
sunfish of the ocean right there, man.
I've been to Venice, Louisiana a handful of times, and
Oh,
some
have
other.
you been on the humpway out there?
I don't know if it's what.
Out past the oil rigs?
Yeah, I've been out to the oil rigs.
Oh, and out past a
Out
thing
past.
called the hump.
Okay, no, I haven't.
I anchored up out there, 200-foot hump. They call it hump or bump, and we caught everything, tunas and sharks and everything. Oh gosh,
So I caught a cobia. The only cobia I've ever caught was off
I've
an
never
oil
caught one
rig.
of them. No,
It was we were using like a big 6-ounce jig, and you drop it down on the edge of the pilings of the rigs, and you just rip it up.
Yeah.
You'd catch a snapper, not a snapper. I'm sorry, but
and stripers.
Jack Travell.
You got stripers. You've been striper fishing.
No, but that's on my list.
Oh, my
out
God.
east,
Oh.
like in the ocean.
Well, yeah, there are also in the lakes too. In Kentucky, we go in Nashville, west of Nashville. There's a lake that we went to. In fact, Babe Lincoln was actually a field tester for Lindy for a little while there. Babe was when he was this youngster, and we found a school of them that come right up the river, and we just sit there. And I actually used the motor for an anchor. I just anchored it right down, and here they come. 20 pounders.
I would love to catch some big ones.
Oh yeah.
I fished with Bill Carson with Humminbird down at Lake Lanier with him. We did a
Sure.
fisherman
I
TV
fished
segment with that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lakes in the country, by the way.
Yeah.
You got beautiful
Kentucky
water.
bass.
Yeah. Well, I love spots. Love spots.
Yeah.
That's something I learned to enjoy down south. But
Oh yeah.
it's kind of like it's got the smallmouth attitude, but the green bass, like, it lives in similar places. But
Yeah.
I always misjudge them, Gary.
They
When
were.
I pulled them up, I'm like, oh man, yeah, this is like a 4-pounder. No, it's a
Well,
lot
they fight
smaller.
like a smallmouth.
They fight like they're bigger fish.
Yeah, they just fight like a smallmouth. Yeah, I was really enjoying it.
Did you find a correlation? Because I kind of feel like sometimes those spots they tend to suspend and kind of almost get off of the shore sometimes.
Yeah.
Was there a correlation with the way you walleye fish to the way you could catch spotted bass?
Yeah, I rigged them and jigged them.
Mhm.
Yeah. The guys had a tournament down in that one day. I caught more than anybody because I was using, of course, that was cheating, using bait. They were pretty dumb on bait,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were fun
They
fish.
get around the brush piles.
Mhm.
Local boys put me on them. They said, "Oh, we're going to show you some places where you can catch them."
So if you had to travel to one state to go fishing, you're leaving tomorrow.
Hmm.
What species were you headed?
Boy, too many of them. I don't know.
I'll throw a dart at the board. What would it be? Texas? Would you go to Texas? Or
For walleye, you mean?
anything?
Oh, anything? Oh, I don't know. Catching some more marlin.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe that. That's quite the adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And then you just don't get them in.
Mhm.
It takes you an hour to get one in.
It's a battle.
Oh, wait a minute. Tuna.
Tuna.
I did catch a 200-pound tuna.
How long did that take?
That was, it was three of us standing side by side, and it was out this side of this guy and this side of this guy. And we caught him with a kind of like a fly rod, 40-pound test. That's why it took 3 hours to get him in.
Wow, 40-pound test.
And until what's his name? Doug had one of the guys had a a spot, I mean, it's time on it, and what's his name had a time at it, and we had like 3 guys who pulled on it for a little bit.
You'd pass
And
the
they
rod
said, "The
around.
hell with that." He said, "Heck with that." He said, "You get it back. It's back." We got a picture. Anyway, I took a chunk out of it like that, and I give it to the captain. Well, that's like giving him $1 million, captain and a first mate.
So
I got pictures of that at home. I'll show you.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
One of the times I was at Venice, we were back at the Venice Marina there. They have the restaurant that's up on top, and sometimes they'll fix food for you. But we were hanging out down by the docks, and a couple guys came in with a bunch of tuna, and they were all into the toddies and telling the stories, and the captain was cutting the fish open. He goes, "All right, everybody, come around here," and everybody kind of comes in, and he starts handing out little pieces of fresh tuna, raw tuna, and I got a piece of that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what, right off the fish's back, fresh like that,
Yeah.
that is amazing.
Yeah. Oh,
Amazing.
yeah. Yeah, they usually have sauce and stuff too. When they do that stuff down there, make
Tuna's
up
a
some
pretty
good
neat fish.
concoctions and stuff. And Bill Deckard used to have a house, $1 million house, and then they wouldn't renew his land. And his house was his, but they wouldn't renew the property land for the Mexico deal. So he just said, beautiful. He says, done gone.
Yeah.
Done gone.
So one of the things that's been talked about a lot this year, I'm interested on your take here, is it's kind of been like a Minnesota bait crisis, if you will. It's really hard to find golden shiners. It's a lot of other bait options are limited supply here, and the state of Minnesota doesn't really allow bait shops to import bait. How important is it to bring bait into Minnesota for everybody to enjoy fishing?
Well, I don't know. Fatheads, they get shiners and fatheads from down south, And I do a promotion. I go to Hackensack every opener. Swanson's Bait. I've done this for 50 years. It was just a little trailer house, and then there's a beautiful shop. If you've ever been in there, it's a beautiful shop. And the new people just bought it out now. But what I usually do is I says, you need somebody to come in and do some. I got rods for sale, and I got some, stuff in landing nets, and I got a fold-up landing net and stuff like that. I said, I'll spend some time in your show here helping people. Oh, great. Well, how much? What do you want? How much you want? I said 10 dozen minnows. And I want them to be shiners.
Yeah.
So they have no problem getting them in, even the bad times, But I use rainbows. Now, if you like red tails, okay, how important red tails are. Well, I'll tell you what, you take a rainbow chub female, not the pretty one with the stripe on him. You take the rainbow female, he's brown just like a red tail chub. And she catches just as many fish.
Really?
Yes, sir.
And they're pretty easy to get a hold of here.
Yeah, I don't just better block that off.
Okay, we'll go back and edit that, Gary, I promise. But that's so. Even though we're short on some golden shiners, there are some alternatives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what else would you? What else would?
Silver shiners, river shiners, But the rainbows, and whenever, gosh, that's the number one minnow. I like it. I know they say shiners. Oh, I'll go for rainbows, the big rainbows. And they stay alive.
Okay, they're pretty hardy.
They're kicking all the time. Yeah.
I've noticed some musky guys that have given up spending $20 on those big suckers.
Oh yeah.
Where they're actually going to the smaller chubs and catching large muskies and walleyes when they're dragging the chub around.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a pretty productive bait guys are using nowadays.
Yeah.
And they're pretty hardy.
Yeah, and then they go to nightcrawler, then they go to leeches, and right away too.
Interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, we're going to do this again.
Yeah,
There's
good stories. Yeah.
I know you have a lot of stories, but we like to run this to about an hour and a half, and we're an hour 33, so we've kind of pretty well nailed it. But right before we shut this down, the question I love to ask all the guests I have in here is, we're a blessed few, able to work in this business and talk to people about fishing, write stories, take pictures, film, TV show, record a podcast, whatever it is. It's a blessed way to live.
Yeah, bet.
But if anybody wants to pursue the sport at a professional level, whether you're an angler, whether you're a communicator, I don't care what it is, what is your advice to a young person today that's looking at making fishing a career?
Well, I had, like I said, I had 15 guys. They're all promoters, which you'll see pictures of them. And I have, don't let me forget those.
Yep.
And I tell every one of them the best way to get your ideas out there is catch fish, learn how to do it more than one way, and have an outdoor rider in your boat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I tell Tony, and I tell, look what Tony now. He started out as a fisherman. He was in construction, building houses, and he said, I wanted to be a fisherman like Uncle Gary.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's out doing his own thing. Trig now is going to be down, which is Randy's boy, my other nephew's boy. And he's cleaning up his act, and he's fishing hard. And I says, outdoor writers, TV people, whatever you can do to get ink out there. That's the whole secret.
That's a very interesting perspective. And Gary, I think the first time I've heard that answer. And I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like as we get further down the road of the digital age.
Well, we've already made a plan, you and I.
Yeah.
For whitefish, right?
Well, that's got to happen. See? I need to learn.
Now, that's just what I'm getting into your skinnies now, see?
Well, but see, there's a story there, and I need a story, right? And I think that the one thing that we all need are stories.
Exactly, and they keep coming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, yes, you do that. That's what I tell those guys. Do that, and look good. Keep your boat clean. Everybody, and do it, and teach the people how to fish.
Tuck your shirt in, cut your hair, shave your face, be presentable, be approachable.
Trig's got one of them stupid beards, little ones,
Well, the beard's in these days.
A little ponytail.
Sure,
that's his motto, yeah. So.
Well, some people can pull it off. My hair's all gone.
Mine is gone too, yeah.
Well, Gary, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you doing this.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure, man. Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, get a chance to get out my house.
I would love to see it.
And go through the big scrapbook of how I started. Now, this is how I really started. My son Danny kept the scrapbook.
Really?
Oh God, you got to see it.
That would be fun.
You came lift it.
Yeah.
And Danny did this, and put all the writers you probably never ever heard of. But I mean, all these old timer writers that I did through all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, that would bring back memories for you.
It would bring back memories.
Yeah, I mean.
I'm a writer first, so I have a deep appreciation.
Oh
for
yeah,
that.
you love this, yeah. Anytime you want to do that, you holler.
Well, we're going to make that happen, and this is not the only time Gary Roach is going to appear on this podcast, but this is a big, important part of what we're doing. We're telling the story of In-Fisherman. We've called this the greatest fishing story ever told, and we're kind of going through the ranks and finding folks that had some early inspirations from and for the early In-Fisherman crew, and your story is right up there with the top of them. I mean, it's
like Al and I said, the guys are at Lund, Larry LeVold and Lanny Orwell. This is when things started changing. Those guys did more to change the boats to what they are now than anybody's ever done. And I'll tell you the story of how I designed the Pro V with Paul Zarn and Lanny Orwell and Larry LeVold, how that came about. The big Pro V.
The Pro V.
Yeah, the big Lund Pro V, yeah.
That's your design.
That's the tiller, and then Al run the console.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a commercial, which Al will probably tell you about this, but can I tell you this?
Please, let's have it.
We're over in Wisconsin or Michigan or wherever we're over there, and we're out fishing. Al comes up, he runs a windshield boat, and I run my tiller. And this is when they come out, the new Lund, one of the new Lunds, and he comes up to the edge of the dock, and there's a camera guy there, and we just did this kind of on the cuff, you might say. They said, "Hey, Al, how'd you do?" "Oh, we got a few." I said, "Yeah, same here. I got a few." I said, "Al, boy, nice boat." He said, "Yeah, really nice boat." He said, "Well, yeah, nice boat, Roach, yeah." I said, I said, "Al, I got a nice aerated live well in here, and I got." I mean, it's beautiful. Air pumps, everything. Al looks over. He says, "Well, I do too." I said, "Well, I got some storage over here. I can put all the stuff in here. I'll put it away out of the way and put the floor." And Al said, "Well, I do too." Actually, we went through the whole commercial as telling what we had in the boat. So we get done, and I said, "Well, Al, I got my name on the boat." He looks around, his name's not on the boat. And of course, he acts it up like, "Oh, what the heck's going on here?"
That's great.
And Al just did it perfect. perfect deal. So we laughed about that.
That ended up being the commercial?
Yes.
Oh, how about
yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah. Al did it so perfect. Act like, how come my name's on the boat? We get to hear in the console.
Along those lines here, we're actually working on getting a collection of some of the old advertisements out of the old magazines, and just to kind of compare how they've changed over the years.
Yeah.
And in that process, we've seen some of the old video commercials, and I'm trying to think of I think it's a Trilene commercial with Al.
Yep.
Way back in the day.
Falls off the tree, falls into a limb.
Well, he throws the lure on the guy's boat because they're getting too close. Remember that? And then he sets the hook and the boat like stops or whatever. But depending on your Trilene.
Yeah. And then he falls out into a limb, grabs a limb into the water, and he has and he did that one too. And he's holding up the bass or something. He said, "Boy, this line is really strong," or something. He's in the water in the limbs. Yeah, he did some good ones.
So this is In-Fisherman's 50th year. I probably should have started the show out to tell you that. It's been 50 years of In-Fisherman right now.
Oh, man, huh?
Mm-hmm. That's the...
God.
You believe it? I mean, I was not around that long, but it's amazing to me to look at an organization that's been involved in teaching people to fish for 50 years.
That's unbelievable.
And Gary is still going strong. Our 50th edition magazine, I'll make sure you have one to take with you.
I got one. They gave me one yesterday.
Okay.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yep.
We're all so proud of it. It's a wonderful issue, but
yeah,
a lot of water under the bridge.
Oh man,
a lot of people
I can't
inspired.
believe that much time it flew by. I'm telling you, wow. I was there for most of it. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, most of the old days. Wow. Yeah, that's quite a lifetime, isn't it? Not too bad for a high school dropout.
Stay in school, kids. But you know what? You don't always have to do that to be successful. I think that's an inspiring part of this whole story, and your story is inspiring. And we're going to do this again. And Gary, I really, really appreciate you making the time to do this.
My pleasure. Like I say, the door's open. Yep.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah, you got to come out and see the old shack. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to get your address here when we wrap this up.
County Road 109.
I think I've seen your mailbox, actually.
Yep, big old mailbox. Yeah, County Road 109, 80 acres, all paid for.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Walleye, Gary Roach has been sitting in today at In-Fisherman Storyline. We appreciate you listening. Gary, thanks for coming.
You bet.
We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.